I'm Sagar Mohammed, and I'm here today with writer and journalist Afua Hirsch to discuss her latest book, Decolonizing My Body, a radical exploration of rituals and beauty. Hello, Afua.
Hey.
Lovely to have you here.
So nice to be here.
And congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to say I love the cover.
Thank you.
And we can discuss that a little bit more. But first of all, Decolonizing My Body. What does that look like and what does that mean?
Well, I approached it from a really personal perspective, but basically I think I'm known for my work about the world, about how systems of power, race, gender, how identity works in the world around us. And I began to realize that some of the ideas that I really believe in and advocate about life out there, I wasn't really applying to myself, and that I actually still had some quite problematic thinking about my relationship with my body, about aging, about sexuality, about death, about really personal, intimate things, but very foundational things that we all go through. And I decided that I really needed to work on applying my values to the way that I think about my own life and that of others around me. So this book is really the product of a very personal, but very honest journey that I went on to see if I could unpick some of that thinking, understand where it came from, and choose a better way of thinking about myself.
Who is it for? It sounds like it was a lot as well for yourself and kind of discovering things about yourself, but who did you kind of have in mind when you were writing it?
I would say, on the whole, I write for my younger self. I try to be the older woman that my younger self needed to talk to her, to explain things, to navigate life, to give her advice. And I've found in my work in general that if I'm very rigorous and authentic and honest in trying to reach my younger self, it always surprises me how many other people it reaches as well. And I think even if your experience is not the same as mine, there's something about the things we all struggle with that's often quite universal.
You talk a lot about how you've absorbed these beauty standards, and a lot of us do, young women of colour, when we live in the Western world or what we see in the media. What were some of those kind of ideas or ideals of beauty that you absorbed growing up, and how did this process help you dismantle some of those?
I think, like many women in our society, especially I grew up in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't as diversified as it is now, and even though we still have so far to go, it's changed radically. I mean, there were basically no black people on TV, there were no women of colour in magazines, there were no different body sizes and shapes, there was no such thing as body positivity, women were constantly being fat shamed. So I definitely grew up feeling the pressure to assimilate into this idea that beauty was thinness, was connected to whiteness, was connected to privilege. And I think that there's a lot of work that's been done on that that's also really helped me. So I wanted to kind of go to a deeper layer and start thinking about where these ideas that have been so prevalent come from, but also what our older traditions are. For example, I realized that I come from a lineage on my mother's family who come from Ghana, where aging is regarded as a successful thing to happen to you. As you become older, you become more valued by your society, you accumulate more status, more power, and you are considered more beautiful and interesting and worthy as you get older. So aging is aspirational in that society. I grew up in a world where aging is bad. You try to do everything you can to stop it. You don't tell people your real age. You might start embracing many procedures and products that help you try and artificially hide or prolong your body's natural state of aging. And when I looked at those two traditions, I thought I could either choose one that goes far back into my ancestry that really celebrates this process, or I could choose one that makes me feel bad about the natural changes happening to my body. And when I thought about it like that, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, why would I choose the thing that makes me feel bad about myself versus the thing that is rooted in generations of my ancestors? So I think it's also reconnecting with that ancestral wisdom. And that's something that I'm really fascinated by. I've always been really interested in identity and heritage and lineage. But I coined this phrase in the book, ancestral deficiency syndrome, because I think we're actually, as a collective in humanity, going through a bit of an ancestral crisis at the moment. And across different cultures and regions, there is this obsession with understanding where you're from, reconnecting with your ancestors, doing DNA tests, going on heritage visits. It's actually a very prevalent idea that's really gone quite viral in our age. And I think the reason is that many of us are searching for that deeper meaning or that older story or that bigger connection with where we really come from.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think you mentioned this idea of choosing between, you know, this ancestral celebration of your culture and your traditions and why, and how that was celebrating age versus, you know, the surroundings that you grew up in. When did you kind of have that reckoning where you thought, okay, which one, like, how do I pick one?
So I turned 40, and a lot of the people in my life were beginning to, at that age, start to have cosmetic procedures, operations, surgical interventions to try and prolong their youth. And in some cases, it's almost necessity. I mean, if you work in the media, if you're an actor or a TV presenter, you face an actual career penalty for beginning to visibly age. It's not just, it would be nice to look younger. It's like, I might lose my job if I don't look younger. And I really had a lot of empathy for the fact that people were going through that, and began to question myself, should I be thinking about this if I want a career in the public eye? Meanwhile, in my family, my Ghanaian family, I have always been raised with this idea that traditional practices of scarification and tattooing, which stretch back to ancient and even prehistoric times, actually in almost all cultures. I mean, whether you look to the Arctic or the Amazon, to West Africa or the Middle East or East Asia, it's fascinating how widespread these traditions of scarification and tattooing are. And I was raised to regard those as kind of backward, you know, something that colonialism helped us overcome and become more modern and westernized in our thinking. And suddenly I had this epiphany where I thought, I regard it as problematic to mark your body in ancient traditions that connect you to your community and your identity. But I think it's perfectly fine to go under a surgeon's knife to artificially look younger than you are. Like, something has gone wrong here. Why does that make sense? But to do something that helps you ground yourself in a culture and a purpose, that seems taboo to me. And it was, for me, just a great example that helped me contextualize how illogical our thinking is. There's no basis in reason for thinking one form of marking your body is bad and another is good. It's just what society has conditioned us to believe. So that really set me on a journey of understanding, why does my family regard its own ancient traditions as something you want to move on from? Why have I been conditioned to look at it that way? Why have I never questioned the idea that one of these practices is bad when it could probably be quite good for me, and the other is good when it's probably quite bad for me? And I began to see the whole thing unravel in that moment.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure talking to you too.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.